Hi, and welcome back to the Admissions Club. So, today we wanted to start off 2023 with some really good tips for 11th graders, for juniors, because now is the time to get ready for college prep. And so, Chris and I have been talking, and we had a really interesting discussion with a parent last night. And, Chris, do you want to talk about what we talked about with that parent?
Yeah, just kind of an introduction to, a student that was interested in some services, and trying to figure out, what the process looks like as that student and that parent kind of explore admissions and start thinking ahead to that. And I think an interesting part of that conversation was, trying to identify what somebody doesn't know. And I think what emerged from that was that the parents said, wow, I have not thought about a lot of these different aspects of the admissions process. But I mean, of course, as people who have worked in admissions, there are different perspectives that we can bring to the table that a lot of people don't think about. But it sort of highlighted, I think, the importance of having a plan and sort of sticking to that and making sure you've got a good timeline to work with. So it was a really good conversation, and it just, I think, kind of highlighted what we tend to do and what we do well.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because we talk about this all the time. And, the different nuances and the different steps and everything. We've been through it over and over again. But what the kind of reaction that she gave was almost like you don't know what you don't know. And it was kind of like an aha moment for this parent. And so it got me thinking and got us thinking, maybe we should do an episode
Of
about,
course. Yeah.
things to think about when you are a junior and you are in your second semester of your junior year and pretty much looking down the road very quickly of applying to colleges. And so I wanted to talk about the different aspects of the timeline that we usually talk about with our clients and the
Mhm.
things that were kind of like an aha moment for that parent, because I think that maybe all of our guests, all of our audience could really benefit from those. So do you want to get us started with one of those things?
Yeah, and actually, I'm gonna start kind of out of order here. We made a little list, of course, to
Okay.
go with here with our notes, but I'm sort of starting out of order. This actually kind of couples with something that I've been talking and working with some students with, and it's the idea of balancing extracurriculars and academics, right? So, I think there's sort of this inherent assumption that colleges want to see that you're involved with 1,000 different clubs and sports and all of that sort of stuff. But when you take a step back, if you can honestly assess whether or not that's impacting your academic standing, because we've talked about this on the podcast before, Elizabeth, I think, but GPA is one of the most important factors that colleges are looking at above all else, especially kind of in this post-COVID society and world that we live in. So just sort of honestly asking yourself, especially when you're in your junior year, thinking about your senior year, should I be playing 3 sports? Should I
Yeah.
be in 4 different clubs? What is that doing for my GPA? Is it
Yeah.
impacting it or not? And it may not be. I mean, some people are able to juggle a lot of different things really well. I know that I, sometimes struggle with that when there are a million different things going on. So it's just one of those, I think, honest assessment types of things that people need to think through.
I think it's a perspective shifter, because I think that a lot of people think, oh, well, you have to be involved in everything in order to get into the top schools. And, I think that you and I are kind of flipping the script on that and saying, well, why do we have to only talk about the top schools? I mean, to get to your goals, it may mean that you go to a smaller school and you go to a
Mhm.
school that is more personal and values the individual. So, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but I really do think that people need to realize that the GPA, I would say, estimating 70 to 80% of the final decision when you're talking about a college admissions decision. Would you say that too?
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, and depending on the institution, it might even be higher than that. But yeah,
Yeah.
generally, I would think 75, 80%. Like that GPA right now is the biggest thing. And of course, it doesn't hurt to demonstrate, volunteer activities that you are involved in your community, all that kind of stuff. But like you said, GPA really is, I think, the biggest sort of point of consideration at the moment.
And hand in hand with that, course selection. And I think that there's another myth that we like to dispel that you have to be in all AP courses. Well, that's not necessarily true. When you look at dual enrollment, AP and dual enrollment courses that you can take at the local community college are actually weighted the same in a high school GPA. So, you could opt to go the AP route or you could go dual enrollment route, but I think it's important to realize one, course selection is really important, and to take those courses in which you can be the most successful,
Hmm.
but also beware of those really interesting and wonderful specialty courses like health science, like forensic science. Those things are great to take as electives, but when you are looking at core requirements for admissions, really look at your math, your
Hmm.
English, your natural sciences, your social sciences, history, that kind of thing, and world languages, because otherwise you're going to really shortchange yourself when your college of choice actually reworks the GPA only to include core courses.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So not to shift gears too quickly, but one of the other things that stood out to me, and I know we were just chatting about this a little while ago, from that conversation we had, I think it was just last night, was the idea of how, when you start getting into the weeds about sort of the college application process and the selection process and all of that, all the different career and major options that are available, right? So we were kind of showing a parent sort of our college planner pro tool that we use, and you can see when you look at different universities the different majors they've got, not just at the undergraduate level but thinking ahead to things like master's degrees, that kind of stuff. But you start to see careers too, and that comes from some of the personality assessments that we do as well. And so I think when parents and students start seeing just the sheer volume of things that are there, it can be initially a little bit overwhelming, but you start to see some trends, which has been kind of an interesting piece of this whole process, I think, where you see that someone trends towards journalism in one assessment and then writing in another. And you start to see, oh, there's kind of a funnel happening here, and we're driving you towards something and identifying something that you might actually love.
I think that we benefit from being former academic advisors as well as instructors. And I know that you are still teaching, so I'm not saying that you're a former professor, not at
No,
all.
no, no, you're
But
good. Yeah.
when you talk about academic advising, we were always thinking about that. And we were always thinking about ways to encourage students to draw upon their preferences and their talents. And so I'll give you an example. I was just working with one of our new students, and she said that she wants to go into criminal justice, which I never say, no, you don't want to do that. I mean, I want them to pursue whatever they want to pursue at this time. And even if a student is like, I don't know what I want to do, I value that, I honor that, and that's absolutely fine. But this student said that she wanted to go into criminal justice. And then all of her clubs and organizations and internships were kind of speaking political science. And so
Yeah.
I said, "Have you ever heard political science?" And she had heard of it, and then she got a little bit of an aha moment where she was like, "Wow, I never really thought of that." And so I love those conversations because it's one of those things where we're kind of older and more seasoned and have
That's
talked
a
to
good
a
word.
lot
I
of
like I like
students.
more seasoned. I'm gonna go with that. That's good.
More seasoned. And so, really, it was just so cool to be like, "Have you thought of this?" And have her get excited about that.
And that's one of the great things that we do and we offer, right? Is sort of those conversations to help. And it's funny because it kind of teases itself out on the part of the student. They kind of answer their own questions sometimes, depending on how the conversations are going. But I think back, and I don't want to go too far off on a tangent here, but I think back to when I was in college. I went in as a computer science major without having done any kind of research into what that actually was. I took one class in it and realized that was a huge mistake because it's super math heavy, and that's not really how I think. And I kind of ping ponged around a little bit until I landed on a major kind of in my sophomore year. So, the benefit of having these discussions and using these tools is that people have a really good idea about what they want to focus on based on our advising experience, based on our admissions experience, and having those conversations. And so it's just a great thing.
Yeah, and it is all about the educator heart. I mean that we are educators at heart, and to be able to sort of bring up opportunities in that like natural way where we were like, "Well, what about this?" And just to see that student, it's like being in your classroom and you see that student like get it or get excited. I mean, I'm just looking for a little bit of excitement, you know? I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be the thing.
That's and I'm thinking about some of the classes that I've just taught recently and talking about argumentative topics and, sort of naturally in writing about those things, depending on the topic they're looking at, sometimes you start to see what things students are passionate about. And, meeting with them individually to talk about the paper, sometimes it might come up, that they really want to think about that as a career. So again, tying it back to what we do as instructors and teachers, like that, it's hard to separate those things, I think, especially for us, just having that background.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing along the lines of you don't know what you don't know. I think that a major part of this whole process is the element of time and
Mhm.
having time to adjust or having time to change or perhaps having time to correct. You know, I can really tell the difference in working with students. I'm not saying necessarily ninth grade, but ninth grade putting some foundational ideas about time management, about, course selection, the things that they can use in high school. But then in 10th grade, really having that opportunity to say, I maybe not taking that health science track, maybe going a little bit more into biology, environmental biology, that kind of thing. So I really appreciate it when students find us earlier, and it doesn't have to be like a long-term relationship at
Right.
first, but to just kind of educate them so that they have time to adjust. Whereas, as we know, when we get people that are late juniors, early seniors, and that's where I just think of it as triage. Like you've done everything,
Yeah.
and now we're just working with it.
Yeah, and that just to circle back to what you were kind of referencing about you don't know what you don't know. And I posted a video today actually on our social media accounts about the whole soft skills thing. I think that's part of it too, right? That kind of was born out a little bit of that conversation we were having yesterday with a parent was, just the ability, especially, when someone's in 10th grade going into their junior year and thinking ahead about what skills they'll need in college, the ability to communicate clearly and effectively and to be a self advocate, which is one of the things that we focus on with some students. And of course, the time management piece, I mean, that's a life skill that I'm still working on.
Yeah, me too.
Actually, I mean, I don't know that it ever, is something that's completely perfected, but being aware of it and knowing what some strategies are to do those things well is super helpful, obviously, when you're getting later in high school and then thinking about college.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that, along the lines of having time to adjust, having time to really talk about those volunteer opportunities and really, being able to, and again, we talk about this all the time, but you don't need to do all of these one-offs and then listing, those opportunities on your resume. It is more impactful to a college or university when you say, I have spent the last 3 years at the YMCA, and this is what I've done. And I think that as an admissions officer, I was more moved by that, but
Mhm.
it also speaks to the level of commitment that you have to your community.
Yeah, and I think we've used the term before demonstrated interest, right? Especially in terms of, reaching out to colleges, but that's kind of a demonstrated interest in your community. I think to sort of bring it around to that. As you said, that just shows you're not sort of trying to throw everything at your application as far as, oh, I was involved with, 20 different organizations and volunteer activities. I really focused on this one thing, whether it was, like you said, the YMCA or a homeless shelter or whatever it might have been. It just shows that you were focused on something that you cared locally about what was going on and that might translate well to the college community that you're going to be joining shortly once you make that leap.
It's funny, I'm gonna use one of those overused academic words, okay? So, buckle up. Intentional. I
Yeah.
mean, we use that all the time. But I mean,
I'm buckled in now.
in a sense, like, let's be intentional about your choices, whether it be course selection, whether it be the charities that you involve yourself with for volunteering, maybe clubs and organizations. You know, there are school sponsored clubs and organizations that are very good, but there are other opportunities that you can attach yourself to within your own community. For example, I was telling students about the Charlotte Center for Literary Arts, Charlotte
Mhm.
Lit in Charlotte, North Carolina. We love them. Jamie and I have taught for them, so we love their whole vibe, and they need volunteers, but they also want students to really get into something that they're passionate about. So
Mhm.
if I hear students are interested in writing, that's one of the immediate things that come to mind for me. Maybe they would be interested in doing something that they love and getting this credit for it.
And the writing piece of that made me think of something as well. So when we talk about the application essay, right? So like when you're volunteering somewhere, that's great. I'm not going to use the word fodder because that's not the right word to use. That's great content. That's great material for demonstrating who you are as a person, right? So not only does the actual volunteering itself look good on the application, but you can talk about in a very specific kind of nuanced way your volunteer experience when you're writing the essay to illustrate for the application officer who might be looking at it who you are as a person, which is a really cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but to your previous point, you know, we never want to see students that are just too busy, not only volunteering, not only extracurriculars, but we have to honor that people need jobs and they need part-time work. Um I think we need to assess whether they need or they want all of those hours,
That's a
and
good.
if it's a need, if it's a need, well, you know, of
Sure,
course.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, but if it's a want, if it's to afford a really expensive car or whatever, you know, here's where my mom hat comes on, and I'm just like, "Okay, colleges will like to see work experience, absolutely. Does it outweigh something that you do that is unpaid? No. It's
Yeah.
at the bottom level. It's like you get paid for that and it's great for your work ethic, but it is not necessarily contributing to your application.
Yeah, and I think it to go back to the soft skills thing, it kinda comes down to you illustrating and demonstrating some kind of effective time management, right? Because if you submit an application essay and it's like, "Oh, I work 20 hours per week after school while also playing basketball, while
Mhm.
also being in the chess club," or whatever it might have been, like, not that that's gonna be super harmful, but it just kinda suggests that the person may not have the skills to sort of delineate, what's more important, what should I be focused on? And that's one of those things you have to be aware of when you're curating your college schedule and trying to decide what other things besides coursework and class involvement you're going to be doing while in college. So again, it's just another opportunity to illustrate that you're a well-rounded, thoughtful person who knows how to balance, activities, engagement, and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and I'm not demonizing work because I absolutely my son
Yeah,
works,
I mean, I had a
and we
job in high school. Yeah.
absolutely agree with work, but when you are looking at the college prep process, what you really need to consider is not letting those work-related, pressures or extracurriculars or sports to affect that GPA. The GPA is really the paramount, so
Yeah, and I think the one of the last points I'll sort of highlight is, and we talked about this multiple times in podcasts and meeting with parents, like don't forget that you're in high school and you should still have fun with that, right? Like, obviously you want to create a good profile for yourself with the application process, but the time management piece coming back to that once again, comes down to like have a little bit of a social life. Like that's an okay thing to do too, because high school comes around once and then it's gone. And the next thing you know, you're 40 years old and
yeah.
time is
Oh,
flowing by, right? It
yeah,
happens super quickly. So again, don't forget to be a kid, and I think if you're a
yeah.
parent listening to this, don't forget to encourage your child to enjoy life a little bit, do
Yeah.
things they need to do to get ready for college, but just enjoy the high school experience while you still can.
Be in theater. I
Be
mean,
in
I
theater?
just
Is that
watched
what you did,
this
Elizabeth? Were you in
wonderful
theater?
oh, yes, you know
Were
me, I'm dramatic anyway.
yeah.
So, yes, I was in theater. I wasn't good though,
I
but,
bet you were. I
uh
bet you were good in theater.
oh, no, I wasn't. I was
Yeah.
always like, chorus, but that's fine 'cause I loved it anyway. But you know what? I just watched this wonderful, documentary on HBO, and it was called, My So-Called High School Rank.
I need to watch that. I
And
don't yeah,
yes,
yep.
and I watched it last night, and, there's so much. I think we're gonna do a podcast on it because there's so much I want to unpack about that, documentary. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was we need to honor that students need to develop emotional intelligence as
Mhm.
well as the STEM, the math, all of that stuff and the things that we think they need, but let them be kids. Let them be in theater. Let them be in things that are fun and interact with each other. And so, yeah, I think that's really something that we harp on is a harsh word. I think that we really focus on.
We emphasize it, right? Like,
Yes, we
that's an
emphasize
important
it.
thing. Yeah, and I'm totally gonna watch that. That's gonna be a fun, podcast to do for sure.
Oh, it's I mean, I was writing notes furiously, like, I wanna write an article, like, I have so many ideas about this. So, we will definitely r r re look at that. But,
That's awesome.
yeah. So, I guess our main goal with this, episode is to encourage you to start thinking about the application process
Mhm.
6 months ahead of time, 10 months ahead of time, whatever the case may be, but really to start early and prepare. And with that, I thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chris. I
Of
always love
course.
talking to you about this stuff.
Always.
And we will see you the next time in the club.
Yeah, hope everybody has a great week.